The Truman Show was not the first experiment. Because what if Truman Burbank wasn't the first person trapped inside the world's biggest TV show, but the only one who survived it? Because in the Truman Show, Truman grows up inside a perfect town, where every moment of his life is secretly broadcast to the world. But here's the unsettling thought. If the show is so massive, so technologically advanced, and so perfectly controlled, why would the producers risk everything on their first attempt? No producer has ever done that in any timeline. So, Truman wasn't the beginning of the experiment. I think he was the final version. And honestly, once you start noticing the hidden clues throughout the movie, a darker possibility kind of emerges from it. Like Truman Burbank might not be the first human raised inside a television show. He might just be the first one that worked. And it kind of makes you think, how are the other ones failing? How did that look? Let's start with the fact that this is a perfect prison. Because from the outside, Truman's world looks like paradise. Sea Haven is clean, is friendly, is safe, and we all know. But beneath the pastel houses and smiling neighbors is something else entirely. It's like a laboratory. Christoph, the show's creator, openly admits when he says, and I quote, "We accept the reality of the world with which we are presented," which I've used before. That line isn't just about Truman. It's about everyone watching the show. The audience accepts Sea Haven as reality. Truman accepts Sea Haven as reality, right? But Christoph, he knows it's an experiment. Sea Haven is essentially a human terrarium, right? It's like a glass box where a person grows, lives, and develops while the world studies their every move. And if you were designing an experiment this complicated, you wouldn't start broadcasting it to the entire planet on day one. You would run tests first, and anything that gets broadcasted globally or anything that gets sent out globally always gets the best version on the first look. You never see any of the test runs, whether it's medicine, a movie, a show, a car. No one sees that first oopsie. No one sees the test dummy car, but we all see the finalized car. Now, on top of it being a perfect prison, just the production is way too advanced to be new, right? Think about the scale of Truman's show. It's a dome the size of a city. There's thousands of hidden cameras, actors trained to improvise entire lives and consistently. Weather systems, there's traffic systems, a fake ocean. This isn't just television at this point. It's like the largest controlled environment ever built. So creating something like this would require years of testing, but the film never shows the early development. No prototypes, there's no earlier versions. It's as if the world just woke up one day and the Truman Show already existed. Which raises the question, where did all the experience come from? Because the production crew behaves like seasoned veterans, not pioneers. You feel me? They know how to manipulate Truman's emotions. They know how to stage events perfectly. They've done this too smoothly for it to be their first attempt. Even if they practiced for years before who cares? No, it's too good, it's too consistent, it's too smooth, and they know him too well. As if they've been through so many other people, it's just nothing to just navigate someone's emotions. And what I mean by so many other people is that there are slip-ups, and that suggests practice, and practice suggests that there were other people other than Truman. Now, throughout the film, the crew occasionally makes mistakes. A stage light falls from the sky, right? A radio channel accidentally broadcasts the production team tracking Truman. Actors sometimes repeat their routes too precisely. These moments reveal something interesting. The show isn't perfect, right? But the producers recover incredibly fast. Almost like people who've dealt with similar situations before. Like I said, when Truman begins questioning reality, the crew already knows how to respond. They either reinforce his fears or introduce a distraction. They might even control the narrative. It's like watching scientists who already know how the subject behaves because they've seen it happen before, right? And that can only lead you to believe that Truman is a subject of some sort, which would make the idea of the Truman Show a lab. And I don't think that there's a lab in the world that only tests on one subject ever. That's why it's a lab. It's built to test a bunch of shit over and over and over again until they get it perfect. Then they can show people. Another take that reinforces the theory that the Truman Show essentially is just a lab and Truman is just merely a subject is the fact that they use trauma to shape the subject, like dudes in lab coats would do to rats. One of the biggest obstacles keeping Truman inside Sea Haven is his fear of water, right? As a child, he watches his father, quote unquote, die during a sailing accident. The event traumatizes him, and suddenly, this nigga never tries to leave town. And that's convenient, ain't it? Because what's fascinating is how calculated the moment feels. It's almost as if the producers learned something important. People naturally want to explore. So to keep Truman inside the dome, they had to engineer psychological barriers, and one of them was fear. But why would they know this strategy would work unless early experiments failed, right? Because just knowing psychology isn't enough. Maybe previous subjects tried to escape too soon. Maybe they questioned the reality earlier than Truman did. If that happened, the producers would need a better method, and so they built one, a trauma strong enough to keep Truman contained. And that's the darker side of this, is like, what if the other people, they were just killed because they tried to leave? Like they found out too soon, it wasn't profitable, they just knocked them off, next guy. And I only take that step because you have to think logically. if you can't psychologically contain him, emotionally you can't get to him anymore because he's already questioning reality. Mentally, he's not going to listen. All you have left is to physically contain this person, but you're running a show. So you can't just put him in a straitjacket, right? So it's like you got to do something, and it's not profitable to keep something around that's not doing what you need as far as the test results. Literally just like rats in a lab. Now, another thing, Christoph, the show's creator, he has a God complex, and motherfuckers who have this are just literally stupid, but it comes from something, and it stems from time. So, comes from control at the end of the day, and time. So naturally, with that equation, this cannot be the first time. Christoph doesn't see Truman as a victim either. He sees him as a creation. At one point he says, and I quote, "I have given Truman the chance to lead a normal life." But that line reveals something deeper. Christoph doesn't talk like a director. He talks like a scientist defending an experiment. To him, Truman isn't a kidnapped child. He's data. He's essentially a living study on how humans behave inside a controlled reality. And experiments rarely succeed on the first attempt. Scientists test, they adjust, refine, then try again. Which brings us to the theory that changes the entire movie. Truman's essentially a lab rat. Better yet, he's the lab rat. He's the one everyone wants to see. He's the one that we can show the world. He's the one that worked. And there are hidden clues. There are subtle hints scattered throughout the entire film. You gotta keep in mind, the world already treats Truman like a global icon from the moment we see the show. The infrastructure supporting the broadcast is enormous. Entire industries revolve around Truman's life. There's merchandise, sponsorships, 24-hour coverage. It's hard to imagine investors funding something this risky without previous proof that it could work. That's just the world we live in, which leads to a chilling idea. What if Truman wasn't the first child adopted by the studio? He's just simply the first successful subject. The others might have broken down psychologically, discovered the truth way too early, again like we said earlier, which is not convenient, or just refused to cooperate in general. And those failures would never reach television because the world only sees the success story. If you like what you're hearing, hit that like. Now it's time for the theory in full. You know it's my favorite part. I'm gonna break it down very smooth too. Before Truman Burbank, the producers of The Truman Show ran earlier versions of the experiment. Children were raised inside prototype environments. They had smaller domes, earlier simulations, but those subjects didn't behave the way producers had hoped. Some questioned reality too early, some attempted to escape, some psychologically just collapsed under pressure. So the creators refined the formula. They improved the environment, they controlled the narrative more tightly, they engineered childhood trauma to limit exploration, and finally, they created Truman Burbank, the first subject stable enough to grow up inside the illusion. Or should I say, naturally grow up inside the illusion? Because not the first experiment, just the first one that worked. And all this makes you want to do is think about, what does it mean to fail? Because if Truman was the first successful subject, then there's an uncomfortable question the film never answers, and that's what happened to the ones before him. Running an experiment like this one in The Truman Show would almost certainly involve trial runs. There would be smaller environments, there would be earlier test subjects, children raised inside of artificial worlds just to see if the concept would even work, right? But humans aren't as predictable as scripts. Some of those earlier subjects may have figured it out too soon. Imagine a child noticing the same people walking the same routes every day, the same cars circling the same blocks, the same conversation repeating like actors stuck in rehearsal. If a subject began questioning the world too early, the entire illusion would collapse. You know, children in general, the frontal lobe, when it's not developed, it's all mush. They question everything. So naturally, I feel like even just while growing up, the other subjects would just question everything easily. Well, more easily. And unlike Truman, those experiments wouldn't have millions of viewers invested in the outcome. They could simply just be shut down. The dome dismantled, or the broadcast could be erased, or the subject quietly removed from the program. All they got to do is delete the VOD, and then they got to restart. It's crazy. So to the public, The Truman Show would still appear to be a revolutionary idea. But behind the scenes, it may have taken several failed lives before the producers finally got it right, which makes Truman less like the star of the show and more like the final survivor of a series of invisible experiments. Crazy. And then you have the other possibility where it might just be even darker because the subjects didn't escape the illusion, they just broke. Living inside a perfectly controlled reality is kind of like living inside a mirror maze. Every conversation is scripted and every relationship is manufactured. You got every moment of your life being watched. So for most people, that kind of environment would slowly erode their sense of reality, which is why everything happens for a reason and everyone just doesn't need to be famous and rich and everything, right? Paranoia would set in. They might start questioning everyone around them, friends, family, even the sky itself. And those earlier subjects reached that point. The producers behind The Truman Show would face a problem easily. A psychologically unstable subject doesn't make good television. So instead of broadcasting their collapse to the world, the studio would quietly end the experiment. Not because the idea failed, but because the subject did. That's what makes Truman different. Despite the manipulation, the surveillance, and the lies, Truman remained curious instead of broken, hopeful instead of paranoid. It's kind of convenient. Very convenient, actually. Which means Truman wasn't just the main character of the show. He was the only person strong enough to survive it, which reinforces the theory right? And maybe that's the real reason why the world fell in love with him, because deep down, everyone watching was asking the exact same question. If we discovered our entire life was fake, would we have the courage to walk through the exit door? Now, at the end of the movie, Truman sails to the edge of the world and touches a painted sky, right? It's one of the most powerful moments in film history because it's just symbolism for so many different things. But if this theory is true, that moment means something even bigger. Truman isn't just escaping a TV show, he's escaping an experiment decades in the making. And the scariest part, the audience watching his life unfold never even questioned it. Because just like Christoph said, we accept the reality of the world with which we are presented. And sometimes the truth is hiding just beyond the horizon. That's my theory. If you like this theory, hit the like. If you don't, put in the comments, debunk it. Don't forget to subscribe. And with that, y'all stay smooth.
Jesus, do you think he knows?
Hello?
Better call Christoph.
Hello?